He is also a graduate of Kenyon, the executive director of the Capitol Square Review and Advisory Board, Laura Battacletti, who does such a fine job in regard to the Capitol. She is also a graduate, and of course, Paul Newman, Joanne Woodward, Allison Janney, to name just a few. Tomorrow marks the 50th anniversary of the beginning of the agency that eventually became the Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. In 1970, then Governor James Rhodes signed the bill into law that created an independent, 7-member commission to direct Ohio's vocational rehabilitation program. Now called Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, the agency is an important part of my cabinet. They work to empower Ohioans with disabilities, and they do a phenomenal job. Today we want to recognize Director Kevin Miller and his team, all the staff at OOD, the providers, the community partners who help individuals with disabilities prepare for and succeed in the workplace while boosting confidence and encouraging independence. I want to thank all of you for your dedication, your commitment to helping Ohioans live up to their full God-given potential. Now let's take a quick look at this video about opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities.
Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. We're the state agency that empowers Ohioans with disabilities through employment, disability determination, and independence. More than 1.6 million Ohioans have a disability, and nearly 870,000 of them are of working age. OOD serves individuals with physical, intellectual, sensory, and mental health disabilities. Our bureaus of vocational rehabilitation and services for the visually impaired help people with disabilities get and keep a job. Our counselors help with career exploration and counseling, assistive technology, resume and interview prep, internships, and permanent employment. Our business relations team connects participants with a wide network of employer partners. If someone is unable to work because of a disability, our Division of Disability Determination will assist them through the Social Security disability benefits process. If you or you know has a disability, visit oodworks.com to get started. Brought to you by Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. Visit us online at ood.ohio.gov.
Earlier this afternoon, Mr. George Floyd's funeral service began, and our nation continues to mourn. Last week I talked about some of the efforts that we intend to undertake regarding policing in Ohio. In 2015, then Governor John Kasich formed Ohio's Collaborative Community Police Advisory Board to create uniform minimum standards for Ohio's law enforcement agencies. Tier 1, what's called Tier 1, covered use of force, which includes deadly force, and also hiring and recruitment, those two different things. Having a diverse police force is certainly important, and these standards also place the preservation of human life as the highest priority. As of today, 79% of Ohio's law enforcement officers work for an agency that has voluntarily complied with these standards or is in the process of getting certification. However, the number of these certified agencies only make up a little more than half of all of Ohio's departments. There are over 800 departments. More than 400 of those agencies in the state have not chosen to pursue certification, showing that they meet these minimum standards. Now, there may be many reasons why these departments have not done that. And in some cases, I'm sure that they would say that their standards are just as good, if not higher. But I am encouraging today the 400-plus police departments around the state of Ohio that are not certified in these minimum standards to begin working on this process. We'll work with them to help ensure their compliance. I've directed the Department of Public Safety's Office of Criminal Justice Services, which oversees the certification process, to reach out directly to every single police agency in the state that is not meeting these standards and to assist them any way that they can. A report listing the agencies that have and that have not chosen to pursue certification on these minimum standards is available on the Ohio Department of Public Safety's website, and that is publicsafety.ohio.gov. publicsafety.ohio.gov. And what I just announced has to do with those two standards, recruitment and use of force. There are other standards that have been outlined by this collaborative. You'll see in the report, when you go to that page, that the collaborative also has developed additional minimum standards for law enforcement, including standards on community engagement, body cameras, bias-free policing, employee misconduct, and telecommunicators. And last year, I also directed the collaborative to add an additional item, and that is to set new minimum standards on law enforcement pursuits by automobiles. The agencies that have chosen to become certified in these additional standards are showing strong leadership in Ohio and are showing their communities that they are in fact listening. So again, I would encourage all departments that have not been certified in those to please pursue that. I think it is very, very important. Today, I am announcing that I have directed the Ohio Collaborative Community Police Advisory Board to begin developing yet another minimum standard, this time on law enforcement's response to mass protests. I'm asking the collaborative to examine issues such as at what point in a protest do measures like tear gas, pepper spray, non-lethal projectiles become necessary? 2, what tactics and techniques are in fact best practices for dealing with a crowd that is failing to disperse? 3, how can law enforcement prevent the members of the media from being injured? And 4, when do tactics become excessive for a given situation? Now, let me be clear. When protests morph from peaceful to violent, law enforcement must be empowered to act. When law enforcement witnesses physical violence or property destruction, they must be ready and able to react. We are not looking to give the small number of violent protesters a free pass. Far from it. What we do want, though, is for peaceful demonstrators to feel safe when asserting their First Amendment rights and for the public to be protected against violence and destruction of their property. I believe that the examination of these additional standards will be helpful to come up with additional standards, to try to come up with uniform standards throughout the state of Ohio. We certainly will welcome anyone's input in regard to that. Ohio must do more to encourage minorities and women to join the ranks of our police departments. Therefore, I am announcing today that through the use of existing resources, we will create a new Ohio Office of Law Enforcement Recruitment within the Office of Criminal Justice Services. The need for more minorities, more females in the law enforcement profession is certainly not a new concept. Many local departments have done a phenomenal job in this area, but more work certainly can be done. Many local agencies are, in fact, already aggressively marketing to minority groups on their own. But through this new office, the state will help local agencies with recruitment and with retention. We have been in touch with the Ohio Mayor's Alliance and intend to work closely with them to get results for their communities. We also intend to work closely with the sheriffs and the chiefs of police throughout the state. As I indicated last week, we are going to continue to work on this. This is my first round of announcements. These are additions, frankly, that I can make quickly without legislation, and I can do as head of the executive branch of state government. Many necessary changes for meaningful law enforcement reform are going to require legislative action, and we are working on other ideas for law enforcement reform with our friends in the General Assembly. We're working with the law enforcement community. We're working with elected officials. We're working with community organizations, both local and statewide, as we move forward. So this is not the end. This is just the beginning of our focus on this. I intend to stand here again in the near future detailing even more changes. I want to talk briefly about personal protection equipment, PPE, and give you a little update. I started to do it last week, and we were running out of time. So let me do it this week. As of last week, the state has distributed over 30 million pieces of PPE, 30 million. Sources of these resources include donations. We got some from Jobs Ohio purchases, from FEMA. We've had purchases by state agencies such as our Departments of Administrative Services, Health Department, Public Safety, using Federal CARES Act funds. So many sources for the funding. Of the 30 million total PPE pieces, 27.8 million pieces have been shipped to county EMAs for local distribution. So our focus has really been on getting these out locally. And let me just say that we'll continue to work on this. This is certainly a work in progress. In addition, on May 19th, I announced that the Bureau of Workers' Compensation, BWC, would begin distributing non-medical grade face coverings to Ohio's public and private employers who participate in the state insurance fund. I'm already starting to run into people who are getting these masks, and they're being now distributed. This program, called Protecting Ohio's Workforce, We've Got You Covered, has sent over 1.5 million face coverings out so far. These packages of 50 face coverings are intended to support and enhance any workforce safety and health efforts businesses already have in place. This is just another step that BWC has taken to help support our local businesses since the COVID-19 pandemic began. Administrator Stephanie McLeod and her team at BWC are receiving positive feedback from employers who have received their face coverings so far. She has shared with us a few pictures. The first one is from Ann Harkin, who is the manager of Skin Perfect Spas in Gahanna. Next are pictures from Heather Baines, president of HR Construction Services in Cleveland, who shared these photos of her crew as they work on overpass in Cleveland. Heather writes, "Between the financial help and the mask, it's almost made me want to cry because it shows I am not forgotten." We have provided PPE to our state institutional agencies to ensure that they have a 90-day supply. And we are providing PPE to the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services through their Office of Pharmacy Services to support requests for PPE from state agencies, boards, and commissions. In addition to these early buys, we are looking at long-term solutions to the supply chain. Supply chain that has certainly been plagued with problems that other governors throughout the country and the federal government have certainly run into. Some of the things that we've been doing include longer-term contracts for ventilators and N95 masks. And we are currently evaluating the results of a recently issued invitation to bid for gloves, gowns, and 3-ply masks. These efforts, coupled with the partnerships we forged through the Ohio Manufacturing Alliance, whose work has resulted in face shields, cloth masks, isolation gowns, sanitizers, is truly positioning Ohio to be better prepared as we move forward in the future. And speaking of the Ohio Manufacturers Alliance, GOJO, which is an Akron, Ohio-based manufacturer of hand sanitizer, and part of the alliance, has been working closely with Jobs Ohio, and today announced that it's expanding in Navarre and Maple Heights to meet the demand for their products that are helping us fight COVID-19. So we're happy to see them moving forward. Many of you are familiar with the brand of sanitizer called Purell. This announcement today will increase their footprint to 4 manufacturing sites in Ohio. And with the expansions announced today, GOJO is expected to create 200 new jobs, and this is certainly great news for Ohio. These new investments demonstrate the confidence that they have in Ohio's future and in Ohio's talent, which is hard at work producing and distributing the crucial Purell products used worldwide. We're grateful for all the innovative efforts and the ingenuity of our fellow Ohioans. It makes a big, big difference. This is truly about Ohioans protecting Ohioans. And we will continue these efforts as we navigate the next phase in the pandemic. We're going to now talk with Dr. Susan Kolatar, the director of the Division of Infectious Diseases and principal investigator of the AIDS Clinical Trial Unit at The Ohio State University. Doctor, thank you very, very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, one of the reasons we asked you to come in today was a report that came out a day or so ago from the World Health Organization, which seemed to say that it's rare for someone who does not have symptoms to transmit to their contacts, someone who does not have those symptoms. And we've heard a lot of discussion in the last 24 hours about this, and I just wanted to see if maybe you could tell us a little bit about what your perspective is of this.
Well, thank you, Governor, for the invitation, first of all, and secondly, for the opportunity to say we continue to learn something new every day about this virus and this disease. So today's no different. I think what's important is definitions here. When we talk about asymptomatic, we're talking about people who truly have no symptoms, and importantly, never go on to develop any symptoms. And I think that's a key feature. Pre-symptomatic are people who may have some symptoms, but really not enough to cause them any alarm or bring anything to attention. Maybe a little bit of fever, maybe a little bit of sore throat. But then those people go on to develop more classic symptoms that we think about when we talk about COVID. So I think that's an important distinction. When you listen to if you listen to the WHO briefing yesterday, I think the comment was, it is rare for people who are asymptomatic to transmit infections. And I want to put that into some perspective. I'm not sure we actually know how many people who are truly asymptomatic actually go on to transmit infections, because we've not done that type of contact tracing. But what is important is that, and I think we do know, that people who have symptoms, who are pre-symptomatic, or just at the starting of the virus really multiplying enough to cause symptoms, they are likely infectious. We see this in influenza too, so it's not actually surprising, and I think it's that group we need to focus on. I hope that answers your question.
Well, yeah, and I think that I have to let that sink in just a little bit. But what you started with, your statement that we continue to learn, is certainly true. It is for me as a layperson who's trying to understand exactly what is going on. So what would you say then, from what the World Health Organization's statement, what do we do with that? I mean, what practical significance does that have, do you think?
I think we do what we've been doing, quite honestly. We try to assess people with symptoms, and actually with actual testing and tracing, we try to continue to increase awareness among the public at large of what the symptoms might be. And then I think we need to pay attention to the issues that we've had in place for a while. The ideas of social distancing, the ideas of hand hygiene and routine hand washing, and how we put that into context is, I think, an important way to continue to deal with the virus. The other thing, and perhaps one of the things that people have talked a lot about, is the idea of masking. And that in particular, I think, is really related to that pre-symptomatic potential for spread, both from the source, the person wearing the mask, that we would consider the source patient, to other people in the public. So when everyone is wearing masks, that decreases the likelihood of transmission from one person to another.
So let's say if I am, it turns out, as we look back on it, I am pre-symptoms, and then in a few days I get the symptoms. Let's say today I have no symptoms, but in 2 days I get symptoms.
Correct. That would put you in the pre-symptomatic category.
I'm in that category. Now, does that mean that I'm likely to be able? Would I be contagious if I go home and see Fran, which I'm going to do when I leave here? Will that? I mean, if I was in that situation today, I didn't know it. She wouldn't know it.
Correct. So I guess the real answer is yes, you are contagious, or you should consider yourself to be contagious, and that's why, particularly outside of households and in public, we need to think about things like masking. Now, contagious infectivity is related to, again, space and distance. So the closer you are together, and the longer you spend time in that closed space, that increases the likelihood of transmission and acquisition. If you're living in separate rooms or in separate houses, then...
So we don't, Doctor, really, we don't.
I wasn't making any implications. I was just trying to put into some perspective. So, yes, so I think that's why we always need to be really, really cautious of how we feel and what we're doing in terms of our space and time.
But I kind of set up the wrong question. The real question would be, though, if I don't know I have symptoms, and I could spread that to somebody who I don't know. Let's say I'm out and not social distancing and don't wear a mask, and I do not know that. So I guess that's the summary of the reason to wear a mask, is because you just don't necessarily know.
Yeah, I think, again, people may not, or may not be even aware that they're having any symptoms. And I think that's the sort of that critical period where the virus is multiplying enough that it can, again, the viral load, if you will, is high enough that it will be more easily spread. Again, more easily spread closer to the distance and the longer amount of time in that distance.
Okay, Doctor, anything else we should know?
No, I think we should continue to learn things every day. I'll emphasize the things that we do know. Hand washing is important, not just for COVID, actually, just in general, good infection prevention and good health. Social distancing, or physical distancing, I guess is a more appropriate term, really does make a difference until we really get this virus under control. And then wear a mask when you're out in public, because we don't actually have the answer to the pre-symptomatic spread, which I think is real. And I will leave the hopeful note that I think we are continuing to learn things. New treatments are being evaluated, and vaccines are being evaluated as we speak. So thank you for the opportunity, Governor.
Well, thanks for ending on that hopeful note as well, Doctor. Thank you. We appreciate it very, very much. We are ready for questions. And I see that I now have the ability to see Jim Oddie, who's coming up to the
Thank you,
microphone.
Governor.
Hello, Jim.
Jim Oddie from WHIO-TV, Dayton, Ohio. Thank you for doing this today. Let me ask a question first about what some other communities are doing. In some cities, some communities, they've gone so far as to talk about defunding their police departments, either completely restructuring them, taking away all of their money, starting from scratch, or taking some of their funding and sending that to social services. What do you think of that strategy, that maneuver? Would that work in Ohio? Would you support it anyway?
Well, I'm not in favor of defunding the police. I think that would be absurd. I can't imagine, what people are thinking. about defunding the police. I mean, we need police. We need fire. We need emergency responders. These are the people who protect us. They protect our lives. And if something happens, we want to be able to call the police. So, doesn't mean we don't make changes. Doesn't mean we don't do reforms. Doesn't mean we constantly need to work on this. There are real problems out there. And these are things that we need to work on. I talked about it at the beginning of the press conference today. A couple things that we're doing, we want to do, and we're going to do more. We're going to work through the state legislature. I was talking to Phil Plummer yesterday from your area, Jim, from the Dayton area, former sheriff, about some of the things that we think we can do. But I'm also reaching out to the other legislative leaders, and we're going to be doing other things. But the idea of defunding the police, I just find it frankly absurd.
Thank you, Governor.
Good afternoon, Governor. It's Laura Bischoff, Dayton Daily News. Louis Brandeis said sunlight is said to be the best of disinfectants. Will you use your political capital to push for centralized databases or disclosure of use of force reports and officer misconduct reports for police departments statewide?
We are getting a real echo today, and I'm not sure why, and I apologize, but I'm really having a hard time hearing. I don't know. Eric, is there any way to modify that? Can you hold on just a minute, Laura? I don't know what we've got going on, but I was having a hard time hearing Jim. I'm really having a hard time hearing you.
Is that too close?
Eric, can we try this again? Or let's try it.
Now I can't hear him. Try again.
Why don't you try it again, Laura?
Yes, Louis Brandeis said that sunlight is the best disinfectant. Will you use your political capital to push for centralized databases or disclosure of use of force reports and officer misconduct reports across the state's police agencies?
We need to have more transparency, and I've talked about the example that I've seen, and that is, you see something bad that has happened, and it doesn't necessarily always make headlines, but it's someone who was fired from a previous position in a police department, and then they end up halfway across the state or halfway across the country in another police department that does not necessarily know what their background was. So that is a problem. I think we also have to have consistency in reports in regard to use of force. And so that's something that I'm going to talk to the mayors about. I'm going to talk to the chiefs of police about, because while we get some of that data in, we do not get all of it in. Now, some departments are under a consent decree, and so we obviously can't do anything that violates the consent decree, or you'd have to at least go back into court. So these are complex issues, but my answer remains what I said, which is yes.
Hi, Governor. Andy Chow with Ohio Public Radio and Television State House News Bureau. The idea of diversifying police departments, there have been studies that argue that doesn't really make a big difference when it comes to fixing the issue of use of lethal force in those issues. Why do you think diversifying the police force could help, and what other steps are you still looking at?
Well, I think in basic principle that the police force should reflect what the community looks like. I think diversity in many ways is good. The team that I have put together, running the executive branch of government, is diverse. It's not just diverse racially; it's diverse in many other ways. And I think strength comes from diversity. I think that's one of the things that makes this country great is diversity. So I think it's a basic principle. Whatever the organization is, it's better if it has diversity, has different points of view. People have different backgrounds. They grew up differently. Those things coming together, it adds strength. One of the things that I mentioned today, I talked about not only minorities racially, but I also talked about having more women. Our police forces are better forces when they have more women in them. Again, it is that diversity and that strength that is brought to our police departments.
Hey, Governor, this is Shane Stegmiller with Hannah News Service. COVID-related question. How long do you plan to keep state employees working from home? When would you bring them back to the office, and under what parameters would you plan to do that under?
Thank you for the question. We have encouraged every business in the state that any employee that can work from home should work from home. And so we're going to try to follow that with what we do as well in state government. What we're finding is that people can work from home and do a lot of different jobs. Now, we know that some of the most dangerous jobs, as far as the COVID, they're not working from home. They're at the front line. They're people who are stocking the shelves in grocery stores. They're doing checkouts. They're doing all kinds of things, interfacing with the public. So a lot of these jobs you cannot do from home. But we've really encouraged every business that has had people working from home to continue to do that. I think it is the safest thing, and we're going to continue to try to do that, in state government.
Good afternoon, Governor. Randy Ludlow with the Columbus Dispatch. Yes, more gray hair and less of it since last we saw each other. Governor, the Police Community Collaborative Board established its standards in 2015, gave agencies till 2017 to comply, yet 3 years later, as you noted, slightly more than half the agencies have not complied. Many of them are small, but there's some surprisingly large offices there too, including sheriff's departments. Should there be a penalty of some type for agencies that do not obtain compliance with these standards?
Well, Randy, as Laura said, according to Justice, sunlight is the best disinfectant. And I want to be fair. There may be a reason why some of these departments have not done this. They may be under a consent decree. They don't want to have to disturb the consent decree. There may be some reasons. But I think if the public today, right now, you can go on that webpage and you can see whether your local police department, what standards they're complying with. And I think that it is really in the best interest of every chief, every city manager, every mayor, to have their department comply with this. So what I'm going to do, Randy, is wait. I'm going to see how much activity we get in the next, month or so, and we encourage people to go out and to comply with these standards. Look, if they think the standards can be better, that's fine. But we would like for them to engage with us in regard to these standards. These standards were put together by a citizens group, but also a group that had law enforcement component, and they came back together and came up with these standards. And these are good standards. These are strong standards. and we need to have more police departments that are complying. You know, we took as I said, on the first what we call the first tier of standards, use of force and hiring. Those together cover a lot of ground. You got 79% of the people of the state of Ohio live in a jurisdiction that now complies with that. That's pretty good. But we have a large number of police departments, particularly in the small areas, that simply have not done that. There may be some cost connected with that. So we intend to work with them to try to find out why they're not complying. And I have charged the Governor's Office of Criminal Justice Services to make this a top priority. Now I've asked Carlton to really focus on that and find out why these departments are not doing it. So we're going to call every department. Every department's going to get called. We're going to say, hey, what can we do to help you move forward? So before we do a penalty, before we mandate it, we're going to try it this way and see how it works. But we're going to be aggressive about it.
This is Jackie Borchert from the Cincinnati Enquirer. It's been over a month since we started opening up things in Ohio, and we haven't yet seen a spike in cases or hospitalizations in the general population. What are you hearing from the experts that you consult with about why that is? Why have we continued to see either a plateau or even a decline in some of these numbers?
Well, I was going to bring in today, and I figured we didn't have enough time to do it, so maybe I will do it on Thursday. But the R-naught number, and when I started this, I had no idea what that meant, but it's basically one person who has COVID, how many people do they infect? And I'm told that during the flu season, that number is at 1.2. 1.2. So one person will infect a little more than one person. What we would like to do, obviously, is be below 1 and headed south. What we have been slightly below 1. But for the last few days, everything I've been looking at indicates those R-naught numbers are, by and large, starting to go up. So I have some concern about that. But I will bring those in, and I will bring them in by region, because I think it's of interest in region. One area that I saw starting to move up was the Dayton area, that the R-naught numbers moving up. So we're a little concerned about that. But these are numbers that are, in and of themselves, are at least 2 weeks behind anyway. So that's 2 weeks behind. When you're looking at the hospitalization numbers, I don't know how many days those would be behind, but certainly someone has to be infected, then they have to come up with symptoms, then they have to get sick enough that they're going to the hospital. So there's a lag time on that as well. And if you look at the cases, those are influenced certainly by the amount of testing. And as we increase the amount of testing, one would assume you're going to continue to see those go up. But I will bring in all those numbers on Thursday, and we can kind of go through those numbers. But the R-naught number is something we look at, a little concerning as it starts to trend upward. The other numbers remain fairly flat, so we're not, those are okay. But remember what we've done. We've layered this. We have added this, and some people again have wondered, why did we do this? And I did it because I wanted to be able to give us some time to see the results. So we keep adding something to the scales and adding something to the scales, like one of these old-fashioned scales. And at some point, what our concern is, it goes. And that has not happened so far, but there is a lag. And there's a big lag to it, at least 2 week lag. So on many of these indicators, so it's a work in progress. We're monitoring it. It's so important for Ohioans to keep the distance. It's so important for Ohioans when they go out in public to wear the mask. Don't have to wear it all the time. Don't wear it in the car. But when you go out and you're face to face with someone, to wear that. And we That's very, very, very important, because we are in a time period where we just don't know which way this thing is going to go as we open it up. Out for you on Thursday. Thank you.
Hi, Governor. Julie Carr-Smythe from the Associated Press. The voluntary system that you have been talking about today with regard to compliance with these standards was put in place in part because the Governor Kasich's legislative agenda that was part of that effort didn't really go anywhere. Do you intend to push forward actual laws on this matter, and how concerned are you that groups like the police unions are going to stand between you and getting that done?
Well, we fully intend to work with everyone on this, and our team has been reaching out to everyone, and that's going to continue. So look, I've never met a police officer who did not think more training was good. For example, just as an example, the FOP and I worked together when I was the Attorney General on trying to get more police training. We got some more. Didn't get as much as we both wanted, but we ended up getting more training. So when you look at training, that's important, and I think that we can bring everybody along in regard to training. I think having a certification process or a licensing process in regard to a police officer is something that we should be able to get people to support, because it is a respect for those officers. This is a profession. It should be treated as a profession. There should be a licensing that is similar to what goes on with a nurse, what goes on with a doctor, and you have that license because you are a professional, and you're a very, very important professional. So doing these things, I think we can find common ground, and we're working on that. What I announced today were the things that, I wanted to do two things today. One is to announce, the new position that I felt was important, but I also wanted to, frankly, take a spotlight and kind of put it down so people could, again, look at what the collaborative had come up with a few years ago, and then how many departments have done a good job, and they've conformed to that, and they've done that, and that there are still some departments out there that are not doing it. So I would hope, after today's press conference, that every department would go look at these things. I would hope that every citizen would go up online and see what departments have in fact complied with this. And I think, if you live in a community, in a village that does not have the department that's complied with this, I think you should talk to the chief, talk to the city manager, talk to the council, and say, hey, what can we do? It's not adversarial, but it's just to say, look, what can we do to make sure that every Ohioan, no matter where they live, lives in a jurisdiction where we have these particular standards. And it doesn't mean that, in whatever village that is or town that is, that the police department's not doing a good job. This is just one more thing they can do, one more way that they can, everyone can be assured that that department has the protocols in place. That's just important.
Good afternoon, Governor. DeWine Ben Schwartz with WCPO in Cincinnati. Governor, I have a question sent in from a viewer here who wants to know if your team is still working towards the goal of 22,000 COVID-19 tests per day in the state, as it was deemed a goal a little bit ago. And I'd also like to add on to that viewer question and ask if, now with these big protests happening around the state, if testing is a bigger priority for your team.
Well, I am concerned about the health risk in regard to the protests. I mean, I see the same pictures everybody else sees. I was talking to the mayors this morning, and one of the mayors of our major cities, and one of the mayors said, at your press conference today, Governor DeWine, say something about the fact that the COVID-19 is not over with, that it's still out there. We're going through the protest. That's fine, but it's not going away. And so I'm saying that. I think all the mayors I talked to today agreed with that. And so it is disturbing, frankly, when you see protesters who are out there who don't wear a mask and who are not social distancing. We worry about that, and everybody in the medical community who looks at that, that bothers people. It certainly bothers me. I'm not in the medical community, but it certainly bothers me. So we, again, would encourage people, when you're going to protest, try to keep the social distance and wear a mask. It just is the right thing to do. What you don't want to do is go home and give that to your mom, your dad, your aunt, your uncle, your grandparents, somebody, or a total stranger. So I think that's very important, and I'm concerned about it.
Hello, Governor. This is Luis Gill from Ohio Latino TV. And one of the things that we hear from the community leaders is that they're frustrated because they don't see the participation within the city. Some of the suggestions they have made for a long time ago has been ignored or shelved, and somehow their voices are, being ignored. And some of the suggestions, have they paid attention before, perhaps could have solved some of the issues we're facing right now. And they see how can we participate even more. At least one leader of the community that lives in the actual community can be part of the system, of the solution.
Look, I understand frustration. I understand that I don't pretend to put myself in the position of an African American who was watching what happened to Mr. Floyd. But I will say, as a human being watching that, it was just, disgusting. It was horrible. It was just horrible to watch. So I have some understanding of the frustration level. We do not have to start all over on this. And by that I simply mean that there's a lot of good ideas that have been out there floating around for a long time. And what I think our goal should be, and the protests continue, people can continue to talk. My job, and the job of the legislature, the job of the mayors and other leaders, chiefs of police and others, is to bring about actual things that will work, things that will make a difference, things that are real reform. I've used this example before today, but the police department in a small town, somebody comes in and says, hey, I've got my certificate, I'm a police officer. They should have some way of determining not just that they have that certificate and they've completed the hours, they can check that, but they should be able to check, what kind of police officer have they been in the past, if they were a police officer somewhere else. And so the same way in regard to the use of force, getting data up, information up, is important. The reason that I started off today, one of the things I talked about was the collaborative that had been put together and the recommendations they made, and I indicated to people you can go online and you can look up and see whether your local police department has complied with that or not. I think all of those things are very helpful. So there's a pathway. There are things that we can do that we know will make a difference, not just window dressing, not just saying we're going to do something, but things that will make a difference. And you start layering those together, and you can start seeing some real significant change. Police officers I started working with police officers when I was a county prosecuting attorney. Amazing men and women who risk their lives, who do things that most of us would not do, would not want to do. And they are hurt every time you get a police officer who does something, like we saw happen to Mr. Floyd, just horrible. So I think we are all in this together, and we've got to all have a interest in making sure we get the right changes and get things that we know will actually work and that will make a difference. So I look forward to working with the legislature and look forward to working with the police unions. I look forward to working with the chiefs, sheriffs, and to get this done. And we'll get some things done. We'll get some things done.
Thank you, Governor.
Hi, Governor. This is Molly Martinez with Spectrum News. You talked today about the minimum standard with everything that's going on and everything that's happened up to this point, don't you think we should be aiming a little higher than the minimum standard? And also, have affected groups like the NAACP and Black Lives Matter, have they been invited into this conversation of what these standards should entail?
If I use the term minimum for what the collaborative did, that was a mistake, and that's my mistake. The collaborative came back with best practices, and so the term that I should have used was best practices. They came back with best practices. We should try to achieve best practices. Best practices as put together by people who have different backgrounds, people in the community, people who represent law enforcement, all of them coming together. That's what this collaborative did, and they came back with best practices. So, yes, so I absolutely, a very good point. I invite everyone. We're going to reach out to everyone, but if people have ideas about things that should be done, I would ask them to contact our public safety. And I'll have the contact information for everyone next time. But it's Office of Criminal Justice Services is the place that's going to be collecting that, and we're going to be continue to focus on it. But we certainly we're open for ideas. We're open for suggestions, and we want to work with everyone.
Governor, I'm the last question. Adrian Robbins from NBC4. I understand your stance on not defunding the police, but many people are looking at these inflated budgets and believe that some of that money should be reallocated to things like education and mental health. Would you support a review of police budgets, and do you believe that some of that money should be sent to other resources like education that has seen cuts over the years?
Well, these are decisions. That's a very good question. These are decisions that are made primarily at the local government area, because the job of the governor, the job of the legislature is to help local law enforcement. Job of the Attorney General, one of Dave Yost's jobs is to help local law enforcement. He does it through OPATA, Ohio Police Officers Training Academy. But ultimately, these are local decisions, and these are local dollars, and these are local taxpayers who are making these decisions. So I think when you talk about a review, in our system of government, there needs to be a constant review of everything, all money spent. So I know that with this tragedy in mind, people are starting to look at all kinds of budgets, and they're looking at all kinds of police department budgets. One of the concerns I have, though, frankly, is that as the economy went down, income for local cities and counties is much more iffy, going down, and the place that usually gets hit is the police and the fire and the first responders, because a huge percentage of the budget of counties, a huge percentage of the budget of cities is law enforcement related. So getting the right balance is part of democracy. Getting the right balance is part of what we do, and the citizens of every community have the absolute right to examine in their county or in their city or in their village, how much are we spending for police? Are we spending it correctly? These are all issues that are always up on the table to be discussed. Thank you very much. Well, I want to thank all of you very much. Good to be with all of you today. The Lieutenant Governor and Dr. Acton are both. I was going to come in here and say something like they do on TV. They're on assignment, but they're both doing other things today. We look forward to being back with you on Thursday, and hope everybody has a good day. Thank you very much.
Representative Gambari. Yes. Representative Ginter. Yes. Representative Green. Yes. Representative Greenspan. Yes. Representative Grindell. Yes. Representative Hambley. Yes. Representative Hicks Hudson. Yes. Representative Hillier. Yes. Representative Holmes. Yes. Representative Hood. Yes. Representative Hoops. Yes. Representative House. Yes. Representative Ingram. Yes. Representative Jones. Yes. Representative Jordan. Really? Representative Keller. Yes. Representative Kelly. Yes. Representative Kent. Representative Kick. Representative Kaler. Yes. Representative Lanise. Representative Lang. Representative LaRae. Representative Leland. Representative Lepore-Hagan. Representative Lightbody. Representative Lips. Representative Liston. Representative Manchester. Representative Manning. Representative McLean. Representative Marin. Representative A. Miller. Representative J. Miller. Representative Miranda. Representative O'Brien. Representative Bolslager. Representative Patterson. Representative Patton. Representative Perales. Representative Plummer. Representative Powell. Representative Reinecke. Representative Richardson. Representative Riedel. Representative Robinson. Representative Romer. Representative Rogers. Representative Romanchuk. Representative Russo. Representative Shearer. Representative Seitz. Representative Sheehy. Representative Skindle. Representative K. Smith. Representative T. Smith. Representative Sabecki. Representative Stein. Representative Stevens. Representative Stoltzfus. Representative Strayhorn. Representative Swearingen. Representative Sweeney. Leader Sykes. Representative Upchurch. Representative Vitale. Representative Weinstein. Representative West. Representative Wiggum. Representative Wilkin. Representative Zoltwanger. Speaker Householder.
Yes. Have all members now voted? The clerk will take the roll. 91 affirmative votes, no negative votes. Therefore, having received the required constitutional majority, the bills are entitled.
Now to enact sections of the revised code to revise the state's drainage laws.
If you wish to add your name to the title, Representative, you may do so by seeing the clerk at the conclusion of session. Representative Cupp moves to amend the title. Without objection, the title will be agreed to. Hearing no objection, the title is agreed to. Bills for third consideration.
Substitute House Bill number 104, Representative Stein and others to amend and enact sections of the revised code to enact the Advanced Nuclear Technology Helping Energize Mankind, or ANTHEM Act, by establishing the Ohio Nuclear Development Authority.
The question is, should the bill pass? The chair recognizes Representative Stein.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, may I speak to the bill?
Joe may proceed.
In a world turned upside down by recent events, I rise today in support of Substitute House Bill 104, the ANTHEM Act, Advanced Nuclear Technology, Energizing Mankind, to recognize the global trends and pending congressional action to bring Ohio to the forefront of advanced nuclear innovation and manufacturing. The ANTHEM Act may seem disconnected from current world affairs. However, I believe it is of critical importance today. Nuclear energy will play an increasingly pivotal role securing the world's clean energy needs. Since the initial deployment of the civilian nuclear fleet in the 1970s, the United States set the industry standard for engineering and safety protocols, allowing us to serve as gatekeepers for this technology. However, the formation of the NRC in 1976 led to a screeching halt of domestic development of new reactor designs. Meanwhile, there is a global shift in attitude towards the development of new nuclear technology to deploy scalable, clean energy. Both Russia and China have adopted a go global policy with respect to exporting nuclear technology, including complete reactor infrastructure. These countries have agreements to deploy new reactors in developing countries across Africa, Asia, Europe, and South America. Of the 55 reactors currently under construction around the world, the United States is not involved in a single one of these projects. This should trouble U.S. regulators, academic communities, and domestic manufacturers involved in this highly specialized field. Fortunately, Congress has recognized the threat and is working to address deficiencies in the civilian nuclear fleet and its military applications. In 2019, the NRC was directed by Congress to revise its budget and fee structure to allow for the staging of licensing of advanced reactors. The COVID-19